Welcome to a very special edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. Thank you for tuning in. Special because it combines a lot of things that I just love, like road trip episode, a concert review episode, and getting to do things as a family. Classic Albums Live. You've heard me talk about Classic Albums Live many times before on here. This is a group that performs classic albums in their entirety, and they do it note for note, cut for cut. They're amazing. And the very first Classic Albums Live show that I saw was back in 2007. Matt kept telling me about this, so I went and was blown away by Classic Albums Live's rendition of Queen's A Night at the Opera. Well, 12 years later, and now that I'm doing this show, they have come back. And these are our tickets. So myself, Sarah, Jack, and Marley, and Sarah's parents all went down to see Classic Albums Live. Now, because of the way this is happening, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm sure it's going to be great. But I thought I would do something different on the beginning of this episode, because as I've said before, with Classic Albums Live, they play whatever album they're doing. There's an intermission, and then the band comes out and does a few other songs by whichever artist is featured that aren't on the album they just finished doing. And I seem to recall that when Matt and I saw Classic Albums Live doing A Night at the Opera before, I don't know if it had started to snow out, but I had to get home. And I don't remember much of the second set. I think the only one I remember doing was Under Pressure. And I don't even know if I'm right about that. But so Classic Albums Live is bringing Queen's A Night at the Opera to life. Why A Night at the Opera? Well, A Night at the Opera was Queen's fourth album, and it wasn't exactly their breakthrough album. I would give that title to Sheer Heart Attack because that contained Killer Queen. That was a worldwide hit single. That opened the doors, and A Night at the Opera kind of pushed through those doors. So I'm going to, as I go over track by track what they're doing and what is on this album, I'm going to go through a different format or something to do with A Night at the Opera between stuff in my collection, stuff in Marley's collection, and stuff in Jack's collection. So the opening track on A Night at the Opera, Death on Two Legs, the best way I could describe it is heavy with piano. It's almost a progressive type of song. Very, very angry lyric from Freddie about the band's managers at the time who weren't paying them, or the band felt they weren't paying them what they were worth. Night at the Opera was the first album I ever heard by Queen in its entirety, and I couldn't believe how heavy this one song was. Then they switched gears to the second track, Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon. This is what started off my Queen collection. In 1992, Wayne's World was big, and you know why Queen factors into that. I shouldn't have to tell you. But instead of buying a soundtrack to a movie, I bought A Night at the Opera and just was marveled at how different each song was on this album. It's not even a greatest hits, but it sounds like one. It sounds like several different bands at once. Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon is like the soundtrack to a silent film, like a Groucho Marx film. It's a very, very short little song, and it's fun, it's jaunty. This is a Canadian edition of A Night at the Opera on Hollywood Records. Hollywood reissued the Queen catalog in 1991, making it the easiest way to find these. That's what the disc itself looks like. And just looking inside here, there's some just cool stuff inside here, which you'll see better when I get to a vinyl version. Pictures of the band. That's a cool on-stage shot. Lyrics. It's printed to look like a playbill of some sort at the beginning and end, and reproductions of single covers from that, some of which you might see in this episode. So I've had that CD longer than any other Queen CD. So like I said, I'm mixing up things from my collections and the kids. So next up is something that I got for Record Store Day a few years back. It was a reprint of a very well-known single from Queen. Now, I know a lot of you out there have probably watched the Bohemian Rhapsody movie. Maybe you're not a big Queen fan, maybe you're just getting into them. When they start arguing about something called I'm in Love with My Car, that's an actual song, sung by Roger Taylor, the drummer here, and it's a good song. That was the B-side of Bohemian Rhapsody. It's sort of a heavy, almost psychedelic kind of rock tune with Roger's heavy, raspy voice. I'm probably going to embarrass her a little bit, but I was very proud when Marley first decided to purchase a Queen album, and she started, as I did, with A Night at the Opera. And this CD is almost identical to mine. It's Canadian, except for the fact that In later years, Hollywood switched their distribution from Warner to Polygram. So it's got Polygram's address on the bottom. It's got an A&M logo here. Other than that, everything is exactly the same. Of course, Marley had heard Bohemian Rhapsody, but she hadn't heard anything else on this album, or so she thought. Get to track 4, You're My Best Friend. It came on and she said, oh, this song. Apparently it was in a pet food commercial. Makes sense. So, yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody and You're My Best Friend were really the hits off of this album, but the whole album is just so good. The next song, again, very different to each other, 39. Sort of a futuristic folk song by Brian May and sung by Brian May. And since it's called 39, it sounds old. I thought I'd show you my 8-track version of A Night at the Opera. This is a US version on Elektra. Pretty beat up. Songs are slightly out of order, but 39 is the 5th track on A Night at the Opera. All right, next up is my vinyl copy of this album. Which vinyl, I mean, that's why I started collecting vinyl in the first place. Everything's bigger. You can see the artwork more. This is embossed, the Queen crest, which is actually made up of their astrological signs. And it just looks cool. Track 6 on this album is a heavy song called Sweet Lady. And that's another part of the Bohemian Rhapsody movie where they're arguing over lyrics. As you call me sweet like I'm some kind of cheese. That is a line from Sweet Lady. This is the inner sleeve, and here's what the record itself looks like. As soon as I can get it open. Oh, here we go. Had the Butterfly Elektra label on it, and this is a US version of A Night at the Opera, followed immediately by Marley's edition of A Night at the Opera, which is pretty much the same as mine, except it's Canadian. You can see the Canadian address on the bottom. The next track I'm going to talk about is Seaside Rendezvous. Marley actually did a project where she kind of wrote a story based on Seaside Rendezvous. I think I've got that right. She can correct me on that later on in this video if need be. Again, the record looks just the same except it came from Canada. Now we're back to the heavy stuff and another Brian May song. Brian usually provided the heavy stuff. The Prophet's Song, which is an epic tale, as you might gather from the title. It's got some heavy parts. It's got some amazing operatic parts, which Classic Albums Live Crew does so well. So well, in fact, that once you see them do that, the fact that Bohemian Rhapsody is yet to come, you know they're going to be able to do it. And they talk about that and a lot of the other songs track by track on this. Now, this is called Classic Albums. It has nothing to do with Classic Albums Live. This is a UK series that was done first on VHS and then DVD on classic albums, various ones, where they talk to the band members whenever possible, producers whenever possible, talk about the individual songs and play bits of them, drums by themselves, vocals by themselves. Absolutely love this series. If you see any of them, pick them up. They do it in such a way that even if you're not into the group at hand or the album at hand, you'll enjoy how they approach this. So, well worth picking up this particular DVD here. The next thing is Love of My Life, which Freddie wrote for Mary Austin, who was his girlfriend at the time and would go on to become a lasting friend. Beautifully portrayed in Bohemian Rhapsody, that relationship. This is Jack's Night at the Opera CD. This is a 2011 remaster after Hollywood Records switched to Universal and all the albums were put out again. There you go. That's his version of Love of My Life. Next up is another Brian May song called Good Company, kind of a folky banjo ukulele type of song. This is my cassette of A Night at the Opera. It's a US cassette on Elektra Records. As I went over my Queen cassettes earlier on an episode, anything that's not on Hollywood Records became very hard to find after 1991. So I wanted to find a tape collection that didn't have any Hollywood on it. That's what the tape itself looked like. I think that the inner sleeve of this must have gotten wet because it's just heavily damaged. Now, of course, we're up to the magnum opus itself, Bohemian Rhapsody, which is why, well, I'll talk about that, but not with A Night at the Opera. I'm cheating a little bit at the end here, but this is my copy, the DVD and Blu-ray version of an amazing movie I don't care, but the people that don't like it, you can't convince me that this is an excellent movie, and the acclaim matches, I think, how good it is. Which leaves us with the closing track, which is a primarily guitar-driven instrumental version of God Save the Queen. And I just actually recently picked this book up. It's put out by Life magazine. I found it in the grocery store. I thought I'd pick it up, and there actually is some tidbits of information in here about Queen that I didn't know before. I've just kind of flipped through it. I haven't read it from cover to cover yet. And there's that iconic photo again, which first appeared, of course, on Queen 2. So now, we're going to find out how the Classic Albums live performance of A Night at the Opera went. So here we are after the performance, Marlena, and look who's here. It's Matt.
I made it. I got a ticket.
You got one ticket right up front.
Last minute.
Last minute. So
Thank you.
that was it. That was incredible, guys.
Fantastic.
I think it outdid the first time we saw them do A Night at the Opera. That was a long time ago.
12 years.
Yeah, Nick Walsh again on lead vocals. He was amazing. And I don't know the other guy's name. The other singer was the same one that we saw him at the Rush show. Troy Feener on drums, amazing as usual.
They just finished with Under Pressure.
Yeah.
And the guy doing the
Bowie
Bowie.
He was
impression.
Oh my God, I was right up front. With that.
Yeah, like that makes me wonder if they do a Bowie show.
Yeah,
'Cause that
really.
he should be the guy.
Yeah, waiting to see what they're going to announce for the fall. So
Yeah.
they'll be back, and we'll hopefully be back.
So the second set list, nice surprise. I wasn't expecting Keep Yourself Alive. I definitely wasn't expecting Spread Your Wings. That was kind of a deeper cut.
Yeah.
Hammer to Fall was awesome. They didn't do I Want It All. That was my pick for. They didn't do Marley's, which was good old fashioned
Second
Lover
set
Boy.
was a little short. It went by
It
really
seems
quickly,
short anyway.
but,
It's just you want them to just keep going. But yet another. If you've never seen a Classic Albums live show, guys, do yourself a favor. Next time one comes around to your area, get yourself some tickets. But that's our opinion on how Classic Albums Live, Queen, A Night at the Opera, went on this particular Thursday night. Thanks for watching Tim's Final Confessions.